So I want to, before I ask you a question, I want to play this clip because I think it's a perfect setup to some of, I wouldn't say debate, but maybe some difference of opinion you and I might have. But this is a clip, I believe it was on MSNBC earlier today.
A $6,000 child tax credit for newborns, $25,000 for first home buyers, a federal ban on price gouging for groceries and food, lowering the cost on prescription drugs, and canceling medical debt for millions of Americans. But as NBC News reports, gone are the days of skyscraper ambitions of Medicare for all and a Green New Deal. Progressives are focusing on a more pragmatic agenda than what we saw in 2020. Joining me now is our friend, Democratic Congresswoman from California, Sydney Kamlager-Dove. She is a member of the Progressive Caucus. It's good to see you as always. And I'm just going to tell viewers, as you're doing now, you were nodding as I was reading off that part about the pragmatic proposals. What are your thoughts on Harris's economic proposals? And do you think pragmatism is the way to appeal to a broader element and win in November?
I absolutely think we should be living and working in the real world.
So that was a congresswoman basically saying, live in the real world and bye-bye to Medicare for all and those things. No offense to her. I'm sure she's fine. I want to also add this from NBC News article. They quoted Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, quote, "I don't think that perfection is ever on the ballot, but real progress is," Jayapal told NBC. "Unless Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren were elected president, we still have to work to do to get those full things to be mainstream." Quote, "So much of our progressive caucus agenda is stuff that we know she is for," speaking of Vice President Harris, "just as the Biden-Harris administration was for. And I believe that Harris-Walz administration will be for." So my question to you, I think that how I feel and a lot of progressives feel, I don't really give a damn what they're for. I care what they're going to fight for, because we could all be for things theoretically, but what are you willing to fight for? President Biden, for example, he ran on a $15 minimum wage, and very quickly when he got in, it became, well, the parliamentarian and this, that, and the other thing, and quickly surrendered. Our revolution, I mean, has gotten some grief for working within the Democratic Party, declaring certain things victories when a lot of progressives thought not. But what do you think? Because when I hear this, we got to live in the real world. This all seems like a real setback to me if we're trying to get urgent things done like healthcare, Medicare for all, try to put out the climate inferno, et cetera, et cetera.
Look, I mean, and thanks again for having me on and for playing that clip. It's really important for folks to hear it. Look, unfortunately, that's the field we're playing on, right? Yes, we support Medicare for all, and we wish we could get it done. There's no path for that currently, and hopefully we're able to create a path under our Harris-Walz administration. But under Biden, for example, he immediately said, "I'm not for Medicare for all. It's not going to get done." So we had to work on steps towards Medicare for all because that's what we were dealt with, right? And so I think there is a danger in shutting down any sort of progress, as minimal as it may be, for saying Medicare for all or nothing, right? If there is a little bit of progress that can be made, for example, on prescription drug prices that'll really help people, or on including dental, vision, and hearing within Medicaid. Yes, it's not Medicare for all, but it is something that will provide relief to some folks. It'll provide some help, not the help we would love to be able to provide folks, but it is a step in that direction. And so, again, I think, Pramila's quote says it perfectly, right? If we had a Bernie Sanders in the White House, then we would have somebody that would be fighting for Medicare for all, fighting for a $15 minimum wage, fighting for ending medical debt, student debt, et cetera. But that's unfortunately not the field we're playing on. Those aren't our teammates. And so if we're able to move the ball forward, even in small steps, I'd take that over not getting anything done at all, right?
So I'll push back on that in this respect. I think that, I mean, listen, I've been around the country for almost a decade, and the response I get from most, forget the term progressive, just most working people, is they don't expect a magic wand overnight to get things like Medicare for all, but they want an actual strategy to get it. And what I've heard from, not that you're a spokesperson for AOC or any of them, but what I've heard is, well, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, them speaking to activists. There's a lot of things, and we're working things behind the scenes that you don't know about. And most people have said, well, if there is a strategy behind the scenes, please lay it out, because we don't really hear about Medicare for all. You don't even see it tweeted that much anymore from the AOCs of the world, squad members. Obviously, Bernie has been talking about it forever, but there doesn't really seem to be a strategy other than let's get what we can from Biden and the problem, or now Harris. And the problem I have with that, this isn't your first rodeo. We've seen this before. Obama, when he ran, I mean, he had a massive,
right?
Yeah, Obama had a massive army of organizers. In my opinion, he didn't mean most of what he ran on, but he had a massive army and he left them at the altar. When he got in there, Bernie had a massive army. I mean, Bernie's Slack channel was more members than DSA. And frankly, Bernie chose to work within the administration, work with Biden, and did not activate his base. And, you know, so what is going on? What is the strategy other than let's take what we can get until we possibly have a progressive? And hey, Alan's joining us, executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. Go ahead.
Look, I mean, our one of our focuses at our revolution is to try and get as many progressives elected at all levels of government, right? Fully understanding that it's going to be a real slog to get more progressives elected to Congress, whether it's the Senate or the House. But also, look, focusing on electing, for example, in St. Louis, right? We now have a progressive mayor, a progressive chair of the Board of Aldermen, president of the Board of Aldermen, which is the equivalent of the city council, and a majority of progressives, now run that city. And they're starting to implement things like universal basic income pilot program, rent control, other things that, we as progressives, of course, support. So yes, Congress is important. We need to get more progressives in Congress so that we can move things like Medicare for all. Unfortunately, right now we're, taking losses, right, because of AIPAC with Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman and others that would be supporters of some of our priorities. And so we also have to focus at the local level, right? A lot of stuff that happens in cities has a more direct effect on people's lives than things that happen in Congress. And making sure that we are able to build those progressive majorities in cities like St. Louis and other places can help provide some of those, provide some of the relief we're looking for until we're able to get a majority in Congress that'll make these things national.
And joining us also is Alan Minsky. He's Executive Director, Progressive Democrats of America. They just had a conference in Chicago. Alan, how you doing?
Great. And, you mentioned, the AOC and the squad members not pushing Medicare for all. We did have Pramila Jayapal introduce our segment advocating for Medicare for all, followed by a long presentation by National Nurses United that was awesome. And then a representative from People's Action, Physicians for National Health Plan, Healthcare Now, and then One Payer States. And I thought Rep. Jayapal was, again, unequivocal in her support and very eloquent and powerful in her support for Medicare for all. And I think she does recognize it's unlikely that we'll see, even if the much heralded trifecta is achieved by Democrats, that we'll see the administration really lead in any kind of push, a Harris administration for Medicare for all. So she's very conscious of the type of things that are additions to the current system that aren't just, what I would consider almost sub-incremental changes to, it's of course absurd that we have the private healthcare system we have. We all know what the outcomes are. It's a complete catastrophe for the American people, for their health and for their finances. And by the way, where does that money go? If you really follow the trail of money, it goes into the pockets of the investor class, right? It's an unbelievable catastrophe of a system. And she acknowledges that. And she, however, is interested in doing, and then I think she was very involved, by the way, in the Bernie Sanders Biden team negotiations around healthcare strategy. And I think she is a very good, very exceptional organizer, and also a good, really brilliant strategic mind. So she's talking about pushing for the addition of dental, hearing, mental health, eyesight, additions to Medicare, getting ACO reach out. And I think on those fronts, significant improvements can be made that put us on the path to universal single payer healthcare, not sort of in a way deters us off of that. So there's that as a strategy. But of course, look, I don't have any illusions. I mean, I would love to be surprised. Pleasantly, what's going to happen is if we do have something like the Democratic trifecta, and that Kamala Harris is, suddenly morphs into something that resembles her Senate voting record, which, again, that was easy because McConnell was the head of the Senate and there was a lot of symbolic votes. But no, I don't really have any illusions. And we have to push and push and push and demand. And here's what I think will happen, though. And this is why I think the work that our revolution does, MPDA does, and we partner on so many things, including work, yes, inside the Democratic Party, because they're going to fail. They're going to be a failed administration. They're going to be another Democratic administration that's going to preside over a populace that is utterly dissatisfied with the political class, that recognizes they are not delivering on what people need, and they're going to have the progressives and a stronger progressive movement. I mean, it's a paradox. We lost to this massive amount of money. We lost two of our greatest champions in Congress to all this money from AIPAC, crypto bros, in coordination, I'm guessing, and I think it's true, with AIPAC to take down Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. And at the very hour, in the international press, the national press, I mean, however much it really isn't the progressive politics fully that our revolution and PDA support and are all about, Walz's selection was viewed as a symbol of the growing power of the progressive movement, and actually was a bigger news story probably overall. And so there's a public consciousness that we are a movement that has momentum still, and we are going to be there loud and clear. There's going to be no switch. If they're just another status quo Democratic administration, it's basically a setup for the Republicans and the MAGA movement to remain competitive. And they shouldn't be competitive if there is a Democratic Party that delivers on what the American people want. And again, I have no illusions. My expectation, fast forward 6 months, 9 months, there'll be incremental improvements and even building upon what Biden did domestically, which wasn't wholly insignificant, but fundamentally and structurally on the major ticket items that we need to see complete. I mean, look, all the other countries that are wealthy and technological in the world, even through 4.5 decades of neoliberalism, their social democratic social contracts have been chipped down, but they're much, much stronger than in America. And the American public want that here. And until we get it, I think we're going to have dissatisfaction with the political class, and particularly a Democratic Party that supposedly is the party that's going to be the vehicle for that. So, yeah, that's sort of where I am, Jordan. There you go.
And let me ask you both a little pushback, because to me, one of the most important and I think encouraging things Bernie said when he was running for president was, no, when I get in there, the first thing I'm going to do is not meet and compromise with Mitch McConnell. I'm going to tell Mitch, look outside the window at my army, my activist army. He was going to say, we're going to have tens of thousands of people in Washington. Now you could say, well, he didn't get in there, but the principle is we're not going to go in there and try to compromise and negotiate as the first option. We are going to galvanize our troops, our base of activists, of our revolution, progressive Democrats of America, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's one of the main issues in the progressive movement of the recent years. Bernie got out, and then there was kind of no activation of those troops. There was the whole force to vote debacle. But whether it's AOC or others, it seems they chose to focus on working within the party, but not activating the grassroots. AOC started right outside Nancy Pelosi's office with the climate people, and quickly that those kind of protests stopped. With the disclaimer, neither of you are spokespeople for any of these folks. Don't we need a lot more of that? Don't we need more confrontation, activating the troops, getting a little bit more confrontational? Because I'm not seeing that from the squad. The only one really, as of recently, is Rashida Tlaib, with her brave, holding up that war criminal sign when Netanyahu spoke. But I think people are not expecting perfection from elected progressives. They want them to rabble rouse. They want them to activate the base. And I don't see that happening. Revolutions in your title, and I know you want one, Alan. Tell me where I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
Go for
Look, and there is, the cardinal sin that a lot of elected progressives in particular, engage in, which is trying to play an inside game, right? You talked a little bit about all the things that are happening behind the scenes that, I'm not privy to, and neither is anybody else here. And, we don't know what that is, right? But we do know that inside strategy only works if there's a big outside strategy pushing hard, right? We saw a little bit of that with the uncommitted vote. It kicked off in Michigan with Listen to Michigan and other places. And you saw a change in the way Biden was at least talking about the conflict in Gaza, even though no real solutions have happened. They withheld some bombs from getting shipped over for a couple of weeks before they actually shipped them over. But there was a little bit of a change in rhetoric, and that was because there was a big outside push challenging that position. That needs to continue. I mean, Nina Turner was on earlier talking about A. Philip Randolph, right, and his relationship with the president, and how the president told him, "Well, make me do it," and he did, right? He threatened 100,000 black men marching on Washington until he got what he wanted, and he did get what he wanted. So, or at least part of what he wanted. So that's the history in this country, right? There needs to be a big outside push in order to change the inside, and then the inside can communicate sort of what the best way is to address what's going on the outside. But you can't just have an inside.
I think communicate's the key word, because they're not explaining what's going on behind the scenes, and they're not explaining what the strategy is. And if you're not telling us, people are going to be angry and frustrated. Alan, any parting thoughts? Please. Tell us.
I do actually. Yeah, I can tell you this. Let me say this. Look, Paco Fabian and Joseph at Our Revolution, hopefully myself as well. We know the members of the squad. We know Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna. Just maybe, we will be more effective at conveying that message at the moment when it matters than Jimmy Dore was. Okay? I don't think we're going to be hurling vituperative and gratuitous insults and ugly insults at people. And also, we're down. I can't speak ever for OR, but I can pretty much say from out here, it looks like I think OR, and I know OR is down, and PDA is totally down to do exactly what you described in terms of mobilization. But it does take mobilization from good faith actors like OR and PDA, as opposed to vituperative. And this is not Jordan Charlton, by the way. Jordan, your work as a journalist, as you know, I think is exceptional.
Thank you.
But when Jimmy Dore is leading the charge, and maybe we shouldn't be surprised he ends up on Alex Jones or wherever he ends up after that. I don't know if he's actually been on Alex Jones. I'm pretty sure he's been on Fox News a lot. So, but anyway, I do want to say this. There will be an opportunity.
He did just have a nice interview with Alex Jones. So we've come 360.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. I don't track Jimmy's career closely, so certainly not at this point. So but I think that we're going to have a few opportunities with. Look, we also are going to be able to achieve some things that are very important with the mainstream of the Democratic Party right off the bat. And I think we have to be adamant that these things have to be achieved right off the bat. And it's popular mobilization, I think they'll be happy to see. That could lay the table for, again, we get this sort of muscle in shape and we're getting our bodies in shape for this kind of activism. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, they're committed to passing it through a filibuster carve-out and no holds. They can't pull back from that. Harris is saying she's all for it. Codifying Roe v. Wade, let's see them do that. And again, there are a few other measures, but those two in particular, right off the bat, we're going to be mobilized in support of those things. The American public should all be mobilized and absolutely demanding, because don't forget, the Democratic Party has had the opportunity to do these things and failed to do so in the past, often with really cynical political calculus behind what ends up being their final decision. We can't allow that to happen there. But yes, obviously, the macroeconomic issues in our society are central concern to the American public. And the failure of the American political elites, political class, if you like, to address those concerns consistently is at the heart of the crisis of democracy. Donald Trump is a symptom, not the cause. And his total, now, going in that direction as opposed to a Bernie Sanders direction. That's us to make the case, to persuade, to bring people in, to be inclusive, to do everything in the spirit of solidarity, and to make that the option for, you know, the status quo neoliberal ante of the present. And that has been for the past 45 years with the American political class. But again, we got to get that going. You're right. There's no doubt what you're laying out and what you're asking. I do think Jordan is on target for how we are going to have to be prepared to mobilize, not only in face of the current administration, not waiting even for when they hit the road. They're going to hit the wall if they don't make significant changes with public dissatisfaction, and also continue to build a movement of people who are inside the party and coordination outside the party. And of course, it's always an honor to work with OR. So,
and
looking forward
I lied. One last thing, in the spirit of them pressuring them. Do you think that progressives should hold out until there's a commitment from Kamala Harris, either to, you know, hold funding for Israeli action against Gaza, or a ceasefire, because she hasn't made that commitment?
Look, in our revolution, we haven't endorsed her, and we have no plans to until we hear more about just what you're mentioning, along with more details on her policies on what she's going to do to help out the working class, right? Yes, it's okay to talk about prescription drugs. It's okay to talk about hearing and everything, but how are you going to make it happen? Right? And we haven't heard that, so we haven't endorsed.
Absolutely. Alan, did you want to add something before we go?
Yeah, I did. Look, it might not be popular with your listeners, and so if they feel more drawn to OR's position, that's understandable. But we had a tremendous amount of pressure from our base for us to endorse Kamala Harris, so we ran a poll. First, initially, we did just a straw poll with all candidates listed, giving every opportunity. She got 91% on that. That just built a greater groundswell for official endorsement poll. She got 92%. And, you know, we're not going to go against that. Now, we do happen to feel that that endorsement is not a strategic bad move, and that it gives us, we feel that that will be, it's understood. We know the campaign heard it. They put out our press release wide and loud and made a big deal out of it. And so that gives us, we think, a strong hand to remain in dialogue and to be an oppositional voice. And in terms of Gaza, yeah, that has to happen when she's president, or we'll be right back out in the streets. I mean, weapons cannot be given to Israel by the United States anymore. That's PDA's position.
Thank you both for joining me. I know you get a lot of slings and arrows, so I appreciate you willing to answer the questions. We'll definitely have to do this again.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.